You people always try to sneak into first class, Emily Carter sneered, blocking the aisle without even glancing at the name on the ticket. The words cut through the cabin like a slap, sharp, loud, and unmistakably deliberate. 10 minutes from now. That same flight attendant would be standing silent and shaking, her career dismantled in front of dozens of wide-eyed passengers, because the woman she'd just insulted wasn't just any passenger. She was Alicia Morgan, the CEO of the very airline she worked for. Before we dive into the full story, let me ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know. If this kind of real, hard-hitting story matters to you like it does to me, be sure to hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Now, take a breath, because what you're about to hear will leave you stunned. It was exactly 1:15 in the afternoon when Alicia Morgan stepped onto Sky Express Flight 227 from Chicago to Miami. The sun was warm outside, and the cabin had that sterile buzz of a plane that's running a few minutes behind, but trying not to show it. Alicia, a 45-year-old black woman in blue jeans and a clean white t-shirt, moved calmly through the jet bridge, holding nothing but a slim boarding pass and a quiet purpose. As CEO of Sky Express and a 30% stakeholder, she wasn't flying for luxury today. She was flying to uncover a pattern, a series of troubling complaints, some posted anonymously on Reddit over the past 4 years, about people of color being mistreated, downgraded, or flat-out denied what they paid for. No cameras, no PR team, just Alicia and her sharp eye for what people do when they think no one's watching. At the gate, Daniel Foster, a lean, tightly wound security officer in his late 30s from Virginia, hesitated longer than usual when scanning her pass. "Hold up," he muttered, eyebrows pinching as he scanned it again. Then a third time. Alicia kept her tone level. "Something wrong?" she asked. "Just being thorough," Daniel replied, though his narrowed eyes said otherwise. She thanked him, stepped past, and entered the cabin, in first class. Seat 2A, her seat, stood empty. A glass of champagne was already sweating on the tray next to it, untouched. But as Alicia reached for her spot, Emily Carter, a 35-year-old flight attendant with perfectly clipped blonde hair and a clipboard in her hand, moved to intercept her like a linebacker. "This seat's reserved," she said flatly. "No hello, no ma'am." Just a tight voice and the kind of look Alicia had seen too many times in her career. The one that says, "I don't know who you are, but I've already decided what you're not." Alicia raised her boarding pass. 2A, that's me." Emily didn't even look. "You need to move back to coach, now," before Alicia could reply. A man in a navy blazer, Richard Monroe, 62, a white VIP regular and retired investor from Illinois, appeared behind her. "That's my seat," he said with a sly smile, and without waiting, plopped down in 2A like he owned the plane. Behind him came Susan Hayes, the purser, mid-40s, all business, and Laura Bennett, the cabin manager, with a tight Southern accent and an even tighter attitude. "Check your ticket again, hun," Laura said, waving Alicia back toward economy like she was an inconvenience. "VIPs have priority seating." Security Officer Daniel stepped in again. "We need to keep boarding moving," he said, this time not bothering to hide the warning in his voice. Alicia didn't budge. "I paid for this seat," she said clearly, not loud, but firm enough that a few heads in the main cabin turned. That's when Mia Lopez, a young trainee flight attendant barely 23, jumped in, holding her own tablet. "Her boarding pass says 2A, she called out, voice shaking but determined. She turned to Susan, who was pretending not to hear. "It's a valid first-class ticket. I saw it too." Another passenger said, James Carter, 46, a father from Wisconsin who was traveling with his teenage daughter. "She's telling the truth." Still, Emily wasn't done. She stepped directly in front of Alicia. You need to step aside. Now. Laura crossed her arms and physically blocked 2A with her hip, sneering as if Alicia had wandered into the wrong part of town. We already seated the VIP. If there's a mistake, you'll need to sort it out after takeoff, she said coolly, behind Alicia. Daniel loomed at the cabin door like a bouncer outside a nightclub, silently daring her to make this harder. Meanwhile, Richard sipped the champagne in 2A with a satisfied smirk. Mia looked horrified. "This is wrong," she whispered to Susan. "She's the CEO." Susan's head snapped around. "What did you just say?" "I said she's the CEO," Mia repeated, louder this time. "Alicia Morgan, you're kicking your own CEO out of her seat." Susan laughed. "Right," she said, clearly thinking the girl had lost it. "This woman? In jeans?" She turned back to Emily. "Handle it." At that moment, Alicia pulled out her phone and called her assistant, Olivia Grant. "Get legal ready," she said calmly, barely raising her voice. "They've denied me boarding. Again." Around her, the murmurs began to swell. "She said CEO," someone whispered from row 3. "Did they really say she doesn't belong here?" Alicia turned back to the flight crew. "I've shown my ticket. You've ignored it. You let another man take my seat after bribery. And now you're intimidating me." She looked Daniel dead in the eyes. "You are now delaying this flight. Not me." Daniel frowned and tapped on his tablet. "Your boarding pass has been flagged suspicious," he announced loudly. "System shows a mismatch." Behind him, Mia gasped. She had just overheard Susan muttering to Laura. "She's not priority. I don't care what she says. She can sit in the back." Passengers started recording details on their phones, not filming, but documenting. James stood up. "Enough. She paid for that seat. She's got the ticket. I saw it. Are you telling me you're throwing her off the flight because of how she looks?" Susan scoffed. "This isn't about how she looks. It's protocol." But Alicia had seen this protocol before. 20 years ago. She was passed over for a promotion at a regional airline, told she wasn't quite the right image for leadership. She swore she'd never let that kind of culture fester under her watch. And now, here it was, thriving under the name of the company she helped build. Passengers stared in disbelief. Tension crackled in the air like a live wire. Somewhere in the background, the captain was asking about the delay, but no one was moving. Alicia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply said, "You just made the worst assumption of your career, and I assure you, it will cost you everything." And it would, in exactly 10 minutes. The moment Alicia's words hung in the air, calm but firm, the cabin went unnaturally still, like everyone was holding their breath. The flight crew, except Mia, refused to move, and so did Alicia. Then, Susan Hayes stepped forward with the kind of cold, practiced authority that comes from years of thinking you're untouchable. "Ma'am," she said, deliberately loud, "you've presented a fraudulent ticket. That's a federal offense." Alicia didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly held up her pass again, crisp and clean, and handed it over. "Go ahead," she said, voice cool. "Check it." Emily Carter, the same flight attendant who had sneered at her minutes earlier, stepped up, looked at the ticket, and still rolled her eyes. "It's probably fake," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for everyone around to hear. Daniel Foster, now standing squarely in the aisle like some kind of security wall, crossed his arms and warned, "Let's not escalate this. Just go to the back." "Ma'am." Behind him, Mia clutched her tablet and shook her head, whispering to herself, "This isn't happening." And it wasn't just her. James Carter, who had been watching everything from 2 rows back, stood again. "She's got the right seat. This is outrageous," he said, his voice rising with the kind of deep moral frustration that made the passengers around him nod in agreement. Olivia Grant, Alicia's assistant, had just boarded after a brief delay, heels clicking up the jet bridge, iPad in one hand, legal folder in the other. "Ms. Morgan," she said clearly, ignoring the crew entirely. "Our legal counsel is standing by. You're well within your rights. This is a contract violation." Alicia turned to Susan, who now had no choice but to scan the boarding pass. A few seconds later, her face twisted. "Your reservation has been flagged," she announced, waving the tablet like a weapon. "There's a mismatch. You don't belong in first class." Mia blinked. Flagged? By who? Her voice cracked as she looked at the system on her own screen. "There was no flag 5 minutes ago." Susan glared at her. "You're a trainee. Stay out of this." But Mia didn't move. She took a breath and said, "She's got a valid first-class boarding pass and a Sky Express loyalty profile with VIP status. This doesn't add up." Alicia didn't bother to argue. She simply said, "Get Robert Ellis on the phone." Robert, the HR director, had been looped in quietly for months as Alicia compiled evidence of employee misconduct tied to discrimination. This was exactly the kind of moment they had prepared for, not just an isolated bias issue, but a system protecting itself in plain sight, as she called. James leaned toward the aisle, now speaking directly to Daniel. "If this was a white man in a blazer, you wouldn't be standing here like this." Several passengers murmured their agreement. One older woman said quietly, "This is happening way too often." Olivia tapped Alicia's shoulder. "I've got the contract PDF open. There's no language giving crew discretion to reassign a confirmed seat without incident or cause." Alicia nodded, then turned to Mia. "Do me a favor," she said, kind but direct. "Save a screenshot of the seating system, right now." Mia did it without hesitation, behind them. Susan was whispering to Laura, her voice low but not low enough. "She's not a priority passenger. I don't care what her profile says." Olivia's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" she said, walking toward them. "I just heard you say she's not a priority, even though she's a verified customer in seat 2A with a valid boarding pass. Are you aware that's legally actionable?" Susan looked shaken but doubled down. "We follow appearance-based discretion per corporate protocol." The phrase hit like thunder in the cabin. "Appearance-based discretion?" Olivia repeated, voice rising. "Did you really just say that out loud?" James shouted from row 4. "That's profiling. You just admitted it." A younger woman a few rows back added, "This is a lawsuit waiting to happen." Meanwhile, Alicia's phone buzzed. Robert was on the line. She put him on speaker. "Robert," she said clearly, "can you confirm my title, ownership, and travel purpose for this flight?" His voice came through steady and strong. "Alicia Morgan is the Chief Executive Officer of Sky Express and owns 30% equity. She's flying today to investigate reported racial bias on board select routes." Audible gasps rippled through the plane. Susan's mouth fell open. "Wait, what?" she said. Stepping back, Emily froze, her grip tightening around her clipboard. Daniel shifted uneasily. But it was Laura who said what they were all thinking. "That can't be true." James clapped once. "It is true. That's the boss you just tried to kick off." Susan's voice cracked. "This is a scam. Someone's setting us up." Mia suddenly stood straight, heart pounding, and said, "I just found the edit log. Susan, someone under your credentials downgraded Alicia Morgan's reservation from 2A to economy. 5 minutes after the gate opened." She held her tablet up for everyone to see. "I have the timestamp." Susan lunged forward, trying to block the screen. "That's a glitch," she shouted. But it was too late. Olivia had already recorded it. Alicia stepped in. "You've just tampered with a paying passenger's record to prioritize someone else. Then you claimed fraud. Then you ignored a valid ID. And now, you're doubling down in front of witnesses. Susan turned bright red. I was just following internal guidelines, she said. But James, now standing fully in the aisle, replied, No, you were following your own prejudice. Behind him, several passengers started clapping. Mia, still standing near Alicia, whispered. They told us during training that first-class seats could be moved around based on how someone presented. I thought they meant confidence or demeanor. But this... She looked sick. Alicia put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Thank you for telling the truth. Just then, Olivia's tablet pinged. There it is, she said. I've got a company memo archived from 6 months ago, internal use only. It says, and I quote, prioritize first-class reassignments for travelers who align with premium passenger expectations, including professional appearance and brand representation. Daniel turned to Susan, his confidence deflating. Did you know this was policy? He asked. Susan glared at him. Everyone knew. Passengers were now on their feet. One woman called out, I'm writing to the FAA. This is disgusting. And then Alicia spoke one more time, softly but clearly. You've insulted me, tried to remove me, called me a fraud, and tampered with official records. You just gave me all the evidence I need to clean house. 10 minutes had passed, and the entire crew had no idea how close they were to being grounded. As murmurs turned to voices and voices into confrontation, the cabin teetered on the edge of chaos. Alicia remained calm, her expression unreadable, while the flight crew scrambled to reassert control that was slipping through their fingers. Mia, still gripping her tablet, had just shown proof that Alicia's reservation had been deliberately altered, the kind of evidence that couldn't be explained away by system error. But instead of owning up, Susan Hayes stepped into Alicia's space and hissed, You need to leave this aircraft. Now. The tone wasn't professional. It was personal. Cabin manager Laura Bennett backed her up, arms crossed, her southern drawl thick with disdain. You've disrupted boarding and made yourself a problem. We have the right to refuse you service. Alicia didn't even blink. On what grounds? She asked. Voice firm but controlled. Daniel Foster, now visibly sweating under his navy blazer, moved forward again. Step aside, ma'am, or I'll be forced to call airport security. James Carter, standing behind Alicia, barked out. Call them! I dare you! Let them explain to the news why the CEO of this airline is being dragged off her own plane for sitting in the seat she paid for. Passengers around them were fully engaged now. No one was ignoring this. Some stood, some called out, and Mia, brave beyond her years, stepped forward and said, Mr. Foster, this situation is no longer a matter of protocol. It's a legal liability. I've seen the change logs. This was tampered with on purpose. Daniel looked at her like she'd just betrayed him, but Mia stood tall. I'm notifying HR. Alicia nodded in approval, then turned to Susan one last time. You've tried to block me, remove me, and humiliate me. I'm not going anywhere. Olivia Grant raised her phone. Our legal team has been recording this interaction through secure audio backup, she announced loudly. And we have 4 witnesses ready to testify that this ticket was tampered with in favor of a VIP. Laura scoffed and pointed a finger at Alicia. You're just playing a game. You came here to trap us. I came here to observe, Alicia corrected. And I've seen enough. At that exact moment, more footsteps echoed from the front of the plane. It was Robert Ellis, Director of Human Resources, having made his way onto the flight after being briefed by Alicia just moments earlier. His presence quieted the commotion like a sudden gust of wind. That's enough, Robert said, his voice sharp and steady. We've received enough documentation to proceed with an internal review. As of this moment, all operations on this aircraft are paused. The crew visibly recoiled. Susan stammered. We're minutes from pushback. Not anymore, Robert said. You've tampered with official records, denied service without cause, and escalated bias into crisis. Olivia chimed in. Passengers are witnesses. Evidence is preserved. Then came the most shocking moment yet. Mia, still holding her device, read aloud. There's an internal note in the upgrade system from Laura's profile. Move Monroe to 2A. Don't seat flagged guest. Use appearance discretion if questioned. Gasps broke out again. Alicia folded her arms. You falsified a flag to keep a man in my seat and humiliate me on board my own airline. Susan shook her head violently. This is all twisted. We're the ones being set up. Emily, now pale, tried to melt behind Laura, but passengers were turning their attention directly on them. James raised his voice again. You're all caught. She's your boss, and you just treated her like trash. The cabin was fully still now. No one was on their phone. No one looked away. It was a courtroom in the sky. Susan made one last attempt to regain control. Captain Turner, please, get on the PA and authorize removal. A beat later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Turner. We are experiencing a delay due to an onboard disruption involving a non-compliant passenger. We ask for your patience. But before he could finish, Robert signaled to Olivia, who tapped the screen and activated speakerphone. A calm, firm voice came through. Sky Express General Counsel. This is legal, it said. Captain Turner, cease communication. We are officially overriding operations pending executive authority. Alicia took a step forward. Robert, initiate the action. Robert nodded. Effective immediately. Susan Hayes, Laura Bennett, Daniel Foster, and Emily Carter, you are relieved of duty and placed on immediate unpaid suspension pending termination review. Susan gasped. You can't fire us on the spot. I just did, Alicia replied, and I don't need your permission to do it. Daniel stepped backward, bumping into a seat. Emily dropped her clipboard. Laura just stared, mouth open. Captain Turner, Robert continued, you are being summoned to headquarters. Leave the cockpit now. This flight will be reassigned. As if on cue, a flight operations officer stepped into the cabin from the front, whispering confirmation. Turner didn't respond over the intercom again. He's not leaving the cockpit, someone whispered. He's refusing. But it didn't matter. Alicia remained composed. We'll handle the captain. Let's restore order for the passengers. Mia, looking stunned but proud, asked, What should I do? Alicia smiled for the first time all day. You're now acting cabin lead. Begin the reset process. You've earned it. Applause broke out, not wild, but real, from passengers who had just seen the impossible, a woman stand tall, calm, and exact justice with grace and precision in real time. About time, James said, clapping. Somebody needed to clean house around here. Alicia's voice rang clearly through the cabin, speaking not only to the crew but to every passenger watching. This company was built to serve every person who boards, not just the ones you feel comfortable with. This is not your plane. It's the people's plane, and this kind of behavior ends today. Susan tried one last desperate move, turning to Mia. Don't do this. Don't side with her. We looked out for each other. Mia didn't flinch. You looked out for yourself, and you nearly ruined someone else's life in the process. It was over. Alicia's words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The damage had been done, the system exposed, and the guilty named. In just 10 minutes, the script had flipped, and the people who thought they controlled the cabin were the ones being escorted out of it. What began with a denied seat now pointed to something far deeper, a culture of bias dressed up as policy, and a leader who wasn't afraid to tear it down in front of the very people who tried to silence her. The plane, once bustling with routine movement and muted conversations, now sat in stunned silence. Crew members who only minutes earlier barked orders were now cornered by consequences of their own making. But the crisis was far from over. Susan Hayes wasn't ready to go quietly. "You're tearing this crew apart," she shouted, voice cracking as her eyes darted between passengers and Alicia Morgan. "You've embarrassed this entire airline for what, a seat dispute?" Alicia stared at her, unmoved. "No, Susan," she said calmly, her voice carrying the weight of leadership without ever rising. "I'm doing what you refuse to do. Stand up when something is clearly wrong." Susan turned, desperate now. "Emily, Laura, Daniel, help me out here. Don't just stand there." But Emily avoided eye contact. Laura had backed herself into a corner, and Daniel leaned stiffly against the bulkhead, lips pressed shut. "So that's it?" Susan growled. "You're just going to let her destroy us?" "No one's destroying anything," Mia Lopez said firmly, stepping into the aisle with a strength that startled even herself. "You did that the moment you flagged her ticket and let someone else take her seat because she didn't look the way you wanted." James Carter nodded, arms crossed. "She's right. All of this could have been avoided if you had just done your job instead of judging people by their clothes or skin color." Susan turned to him. "You don't understand the pressure we're under. We're told to make these judgment calls every day." "Told by who?" Alicia asked. Her voice was measured, but there was no mistaking the challenge beneath it. "Say it. Say who told you to profile passengers by their looks." For a long second, Susan just stared. "Don't," Olivia Grant warned, her voice calm but sharp. "Think very carefully before you try to excuse yourself with policy." That's when Captain Turner's voice finally returned over the intercom, cold and composed. "This is Captain Turner. I stand with my crew. These passengers are being disruptive. I'm filing a flight incident report." Several people groaned aloud. Robert Ellis, still standing beside Alicia, raised a brow. "He just implicated himself," he muttered. Then louder, "Let the record show the captain failed to acknowledge a valid executive override and is obstructing internal proceedings." Mia, still standing firm at the front, looked to Alicia. "Should I call for the replacement crew?" "Yes," Alicia nodded. "They're on standby." Susan watched, shoulders rising and falling as panic built beneath the surface. "This is insane," she snapped. "You're not God. Alicia." "I don't have to be," Alicia replied. "I just have to be accountable, something you've avoided for far too long." The mood in the cabin shifted again, this time. From outrage to resolve, one elderly woman stood up and said, "I fly Sky Express because I believed in the people, not because of who sits in first class or who wears the nicest suit. What you people did today makes me question every flight I've ever taken." Her voice trembled, but it was strong enough to pierce the moment. "And if it weren't for this woman right here, I don't know if I'd ever fly again." The passengers broke into quiet applause, not just for Alicia, but for what she stood for. Susan looked around, eyes glassy now. "You don't get it. We're told who to favor. We're told to keep the front of the plane on brand." Alicia stepped forward. "What brand is that? Susan? Because what I'm hearing sounds like white, wealthy, and polished." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." James interrupted. "We all heard what you meant." Olivia, holding her tablet again, opened a document and turned it toward Alicia. "This is what I was afraid of," she said grimly. "I just pulled it from our training database archives." She turned the screen to show a PowerPoint slide from an internal orientation manual dated 2 years prior. The title read, "Passenger Tiering, Enhancing Premium Class Experience." Below it were listed terms like aesthetic alignment, visual brand consistency, and the most damning one, visible affluence indicators. Gasps rippled through the cabin. "Visible affluence?" Mia whispered, horrified. That's corporate language for looks rich enough. Alicia's face hardened. Who signed off on this? Olivia scrolled to the metadata. Policy originator, regional manager, Eastern Division. Name? Alicia asked. Olivia squinted. Evan Barrett. He's still with us? Yes. Director of Guest Experience now. Alicia clenched her jaw. Not for long. Susan was now visibly unraveling. I didn't make this up, she cried. I was told to enforce these standards. But no one was sympathetic anymore. Laura, in a rare moment of honesty, spoke up. We were all told. Everyone in the cabin leadership meetings knew the guidelines. We were told if we didn't protect the first-class image, our bonuses would suffer. So you protected the brand instead of the people, Alicia said. And in doing so, you threw away the values this airline was built on. Susan finally crumbled. I was just trying to keep my job. Alicia paused, then said clearly. And you've just lost it. Robert stepped in again. Let this be known. Any employee or manager found to have enforced, supported, or expanded this policy will be placed under review effective immediately. The moment cracked wide open. Passengers began speaking up. One man near the exit said, Last year my wife got downgraded out of nowhere and no one explained why. She's Korean. We didn't think to file a complaint until now, another added. My teenage son was in sweats and got pulled from boarding last winter. They called it a seat reassignment error. This is systemic, Olivia said. And it's exactly what Alicia came to investigate. Alicia took a breath and addressed the cabin, not as CEO, but as a fellow passenger. If you've experienced this kind of treatment, I want to hear about it. Not on social media, not in a review, directly. My office will take every statement, and I promise you, it won't be ignored. She turned to Mia. Bring me the full list of active employees who received this training, and flag every single supervisor who enforced it. Mia nodded quickly. On it. James sat back down, exhaling like he'd been holding in fire. You know what? He said aloud. I never thought I'd live to see justice on an airplane. The crowd chuckled, but it was sincere. The flight had gone from delay to reckoning in under an hour, and no one on board would ever forget it. Alicia straightened up and looked out the window for a brief moment. Her reflection cast faintly against the bright tarmac. She'd come looking for truth, and found rot woven deep into the company's foundation. But she wasn't just a leader who uncovered problems. She was the kind who fixed them. And tomorrow, the work would begin. As the cabin settled into an uneasy silence, everyone could feel the shift, the moment when authority didn't just return to its rightful owner, but wrapped itself around the room like gravity tightening. Alicia Morgan, calm and commanding, stepped forward into the aisle, her posture straight, her tone low but resonant. For anyone still unsure, she said, eyes moving across the stunned flight crew and the equally stunned passengers. Let me be absolutely clear. My name is Alicia Morgan. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Sky Express Airlines. I own 30% of this company, and this aircraft, its staff, and this entire operation fall under my jurisdiction. For a moment, there was total stillness. Then, a wave of reactions, gasps, whispered, "Oh my God!" A few quiet claps, and one voice, James Carter's, calling out with pride. Told you, she's the boss. Susan Hayes's mouth opened like she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Laura Bennett's arms dropped to her sides. Emily looked like she'd seen a ghost. And Daniel Foster, who had spent the last 30 minutes playing enforcer, now shrank a few inches, as if hoping the wall would swallow him whole. Alicia turned to Robert Ellis, who stood just behind her. Let's proceed, she said. Robert stepped up with a clipboard and a commanding voice of his own. Effective immediately. The following crew members are relieved of duty and will be escorted from this aircraft and placed on termination review. Captain William Turner, Purser Susan Hayes, flight attendant Emily Carter, cabin manager Laura Bennett, and security officer Daniel Foster. The names rang out like bells tolling judgment. Susan erupted. "You're firing us? Over this?" Alicia's tone stayed level. "Not over this moment, over the decisions that led to it, over the policies you enforced, the passengers you humiliated, and the standards you violated. This isn't a mistake. This is a pattern, and it ends today." Daniel took a step forward, still trying to salvage some ground. "We were following protocol." "No," Alicia cut in, firm. "You were following prejudice disguised as policy," Laura barked out. "You think the passengers care who sits where? You think they notice?" But a voice from row 3 replied for her, a gray-haired woman in pearls and a blue cardigan. "We notice, and we remember. I'll never forget what I saw here today." Emily's voice trembled now. "Susan told me to do it. I didn't want to. But she said Richard Monroe paid for priority override." Gasps again. "That's bribery," Olivia said bluntly, stepping beside Alicia. "And that's a federal crime if it involved tampering with seating assignments." Susan spun around. "You little traitor!" she hissed at Emily. "You agreed to it!" But Emily was already unraveling. "I didn't know she was the CEO. I thought it was just another comp ticket situation. Susan told me to take the bribe and seat Monroe. I didn't know it was going to blow up like this." Alicia narrowed her eyes. "So you did know it was wrong. You just didn't think you'd get caught." Emily burst into tears. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I really am." But the damage was already done. Robert nodded toward the jet bridge, and 2 uniformed airline compliance officers boarded quietly, stepping into the aisle with calm, practiced precision. "Let's go," one said. Susan stepped back. "I built my career here," she yelled. "I've given 20 years. And in 10 minutes, Alicia said. "You undid all of it with arrogance and disrespect." As Susan, Laura, Daniel, and Emily were escorted off the plane, Alicia turned to the passengers. "I apologize for what you've witnessed today. This should never have happened. Not to me. Not to anyone. Every customer deserves dignity, regardless of their seat, their skin, or their outfit." Her words landed like anchors in hearts. "This company," she continued, "was built on the idea that we fly people forward. Today, we start flying that mission again." Passengers applauded now, slow, steady, heartfelt. Mia Lopez stood frozen near the galley until Alicia turned to her. "Mia," she said gently, "you showed courage when others stayed silent, effective immediately. I'm promoting you to lead flight attendant for this route and assigning you a mentor from senior leadership." Mia's hands flew to her mouth. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." "You said enough when it mattered," Alicia replied. James shouted from row 4. "That's what real leadership looks like." A few passengers laughed through their claps. Then came another shock, as the compliance officers led the dismissed staff down the aisle. Richard Monroe, still sitting smugly in seat 2A, stood and tried to walk past without a word. Olivia blocked him. "Not so fast," she said. "You're being removed from the aircraft." Richard huffed. "I paid extra. I have connections." "And you bribed staff to displace another paying customer," Alicia replied. "You're banned from Sky Express indefinitely." "You can't do that," he barked. "I'm a shareholder." "Not anymore," Robert added. "Your membership has been revoked and reported to compliance oversight." Richard's mouth twisted, but with a few murmured curses. He turned and stormed off, trailed by whispers. Alicia sighed, rubbing her temple for a moment, then turned back to the cabin. "We'll be delayed by about 30 minutes as the new crew boards. Snacks and beverages are on the house for every seat. If anyone needs to speak with legal or customer care, Olivia will be up front." Olivia nodded with a professional smile. "I've got everyone covered." James raised a coffee cup. "To the best flight I've ever seen." People laughed, not because it had been smooth, but because it had been honest, real, a reckoning with wings. Alicia took her seat, finally, in 2A, but she didn't recline. She sat upright, gazing forward, not angry anymore, but resolute. In 10 minutes, she'd been judged, humiliated, threatened, and called a fraud, and in 10 more, she had revealed, removed, and reset the system that allowed it all to happen. It wasn't just about her seat. It was about every seat, and everyone who'd ever been told, silently or otherwise, that they didn't belong. And now, they did. As the fired crew and Richard Monroe were escorted off the aircraft, a sense of clarity settled in. Not peace, not yet, but something steadier. Purpose. Alicia remained in seat 2A, but this time not as a passenger denied or a leader under siege, but as a woman taking control of what was rightfully hers and everyone else's. The replacement crew arrived within minutes. Sarah Miller, a senior flight supervisor with 20 years of spotless service, and John Davis, a veteran attendant known for crisis response. Both stepped aboard with calm professionalism. Alicia stood and greeted them with a firm handshake. "Let's get this flight back in the air," she said, turning to Mia. Alicia offered something far more valuable than thanks. "As of this moment," she said clearly, so every passenger and crew member could hear, "you are promoted to lead flight attendant for this route and placed on the executive mentorship track. I'm assigning a director from corporate to guide your leadership path." Mia's hands shook as she placed them over her heart. "Ms. Morgan, I don't even have words." Alicia smiled. "That's all right. You already showed us everything we needed to see." Passengers clapped again, and one woman in row 5 whispered to her husband, "She's going to do big things." Meanwhile, Olivia had already begun drafting the formal incident report, passenger documentation, and press protocol. "We'll preempt the story and shape it around reform," she said quietly to Robert, who nodded and began setting up a board meeting scheduled for the following morning. Alicia turned toward the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We will begin beverage service shortly, and we expect to depart within 30 minutes. My team and I sincerely apologize for the disruption today, and I personally thank you for standing up when it mattered." It was heartfelt, sincere, and from the way passengers responded, some with claps, some with a simple nod, it hit exactly as intended. But just as things began to settle, Mia stepped forward with her tablet, face pale again. "Ms. Morgan," she said quietly, "you need to see this." Alicia stood and followed her to the galley where Sarah and Olivia joined them. Mia tapped open a training audit file tied to Susan Hayes and Laura Bennett. "I was digging through historical crew training sessions, cross-referencing flight leader briefings from the last few years, and I found something that connects this to higher management." Alicia frowned, scanning the screen. "Go on." Mia pointed to a column labeled Session Facilitator, Eastern Region, repeatedly listing the name D. Wilcox. "He was a regional manager before Evan Barrett," Mia said, "and he was running sessions titled Visual Cues and Cabin Cohesion, basically teaching flight leads how to choose who gets upgraded." "That's bad," Sarah muttered, "but not illegal on its face." "Wait," Mia said, scrolling to a bullet point in a PowerPoint deck. It read, "Encourage elevation of elite image. Prioritize travelers with professional aesthetic and cultural comfort level alignment." Below it, a note. "Use discretion. Appearances are key." Alicia's eyes narrowed. "That's code for racial profiling." Olivia sighed. "And if this came from a manager, not just a rogue flight crew, then it's part of a larger corporate culture." Alicia didn't hesitate. "Send that to Robert. We're pulling Wilcox's file immediately. Every session, every recorded call, every memo he signed. Sarah nodded. I'll help. I served under him for 2 quarters. I knew something was off. Did Susan ever mention this name? Alicia asked. Mia shook her head. Not to me. But when I confronted her earlier, she muttered something about being pressured from higher up. I didn't know what she meant until now. Alicia turned back to the galley. This wasn't just a bad crew making bad decisions. This was taught, reinforced, rewarded. She looked back toward the main cabin, where passengers were finally beginning to relax. And now it's going to be exposed. As Sarah resumed coordinating the beverage service and John reassured nervous passengers, Alicia returned to her seat and pulled out her notebook, the same one she'd used to build Sky Express in the first place. She jotted one phrase: start at the top. Across the aisle, James Carter caught her eye and offered a nod of respect. You're doing good work, he said. Alicia replied. The work's just beginning. Meanwhile, Captain Turner still hadn't left the cockpit, delaying final takeoff. Robert called airport operations, and within 5 minutes, security officers arrived at the cockpit door. Captain Turner, you are ordered to vacate the flight deck, one officer announced calmly. This order is signed by the Executive Office of Sky Express. Turner resisted, shouting through the door. She's ruining this company. But eventually, the lock clicked, and the door opened. The captain emerged red-faced and defiant, but Alicia didn't flinch. You've violated chain of command, failed to comply with executive order, and misrepresented your passengers. You're done. Turner said nothing, only glared before being escorted off the aircraft. The door closed behind him with a finality everyone in the cabin felt, from that moment on. The flight wasn't just on a new route, it was under new leadership. The morning after the confrontation at 35,000 feet, the boardroom of Sky Express headquarters in Miami was brighter than usual. The air was cool, the coffee strong, and the atmosphere electric with change. Alicia Morgan entered with quiet authority, her hair tied back, eyes clear, and a thick binder under one arm marked with the Sky Express emblem and the words Restoration Plan, Executive Implementation. Around the long mahogany table sat a dozen executives, including Claire Thompson, the COO, and Mark Reynolds, the General Counsel. At the far end, Robert Ellis, still wearing the same tie from the day before, gave Alicia a quick nod of solidarity. Mia Lopez, newly appointed lead flight attendant, stood near the side wall, nervous but proud in her upgraded uniform. Let's begin, Alicia said simply, setting the binder down with a satisfying thump. For the next 2 hours, she laid out everything. The incident on Flight 227, the audio files, the reservation tampering, the language in internal training documents, and the coordinated bias that had seeped into their operations from the inside out. She didn't sugarcoat, she didn't dramatize, she let the facts speak, and they were louder than outrage. Our mission statement says we elevate every traveler, Alicia told them. That phrase means something to the people who fly with us, and it must mean even more to the people who represent us. What happened yesterday wasn't just a failure of judgment, it was a failure of values. Our values. The board listened, and no one interrupted. By the end, Alicia presented 5 core reforms: mandatory equity training for all flight and ground staff, a new audit division for passenger complaint patterns, zero-tolerance enforcement for any profiling behavior, leadership accountability reviews every quarter, and a direct escalation line that reached her office, not through layers of managers, but through a simple, secure link. This isn't about damage control, she said. This is about cultural repair. Mark, the legal chief, spoke up. If we move this fast, the unions may push back. Alicia looked at him. Then we talk to the unions as partners, not adversaries, Claire added. And the press? We tell the truth, Alicia answered. We were warned. We didn't act. Now we are. Let them write what they will. We'll show them the outcome. Later that afternoon, a company-wide memo was released. As of today, Sky Express begins a new chapter. Meanwhile, Mia returned to her new assignment, leading her first full route with a restructured crew and quiet confidence. Olivia stayed busy with policy rollout logistics, and Robert scheduled listening sessions with employees at every level, on the customer end. Alicia directed her office to personally follow up with every passenger from Flight 227, offering not just an apology, but a direct invitation to submit feedback, concerns, and ideas. The worst thing we can do, she told her team, is make this look like a one-time incident. It wasn't, and we know that. That evening, Alicia sat in her Miami suite, finally able to remove her shoes, lean back, and exhale. She sipped tea slowly, watching the sun dip below the skyline. The last 24 hours had cracked something wide open in her and in the company, not just policy, but trust, respect, legacy. There was a soft knock at her door. Olivia stepped in, holding a message. Legal from Susan Hayes' counsel, she said. They're threatening wrongful termination claims. Alicia didn't even look up. Let them threaten. We have evidence, witness statements, and systemic context. I'm not negotiating with that kind of failure. Olivia nodded. We'll respond formally tomorrow. Alicia glanced toward the window again. You know what's strange? She said. I've spent years in conference rooms talking about inclusion, building language, crafting policies. But yesterday, 10 minutes in an airplane aisle taught me more about power than any boardroom ever could. Olivia smiled gently. You held your ground. I held the truth, Alicia replied. And the truth held me back. Back at the airport that night, long after most of the day's flights had landed. Susan Hayes appeared near the executive terminal, eyes red, clothes wrinkled. She tried to push past security, demanding reinstatement. I want to speak with Alicia, she said bitterly. She owes me that. Security informed her she was trespassing and quickly escorted her out. Per internal ban policy, Alicia never saw her. It was done. 3 months later, Sky Express reported record-high satisfaction ratings, not because flights were faster or snacks improved, but because customers began noticing something different. Kindness, clarity, fairness. The changes were real, and Alicia, she kept flying, not in the shadows, not in disguise, but in plain view. And from seat 2A or coach or anywhere else, she never stopped watching, listening, and quietly ensuring that every person who stepped onto her planes knew exactly what she'd spent her career proving. They belonged.